Hello, my dear listeners. I'm Dr Atish, Associate Professor with SNJB, Sriman Suresh Dada Jain College of Pharmacy, Chandwad, Nasik. Today, we'll be discussing about scientific research. Now, let me tell you, there are different ways of finding an answer to a pressing question. And one of the ways of getting to that answer can be your research work. Apart from research work, there are ways like you can think the answer logically. Even another method which can be there for finding answer to the pressing question is finding some evidences. If that work has been already carried out, you can find the answer or find the evidences and get the answer to the pressing question. So, what John Best said regarding research, I would like to start with that quote. He said that the secret of our cultural development has been research. Because of the research only, we could push back the areas of ignorance by discovering new truths, which in turn lead to better ways of doing things and better products. If you actually analyze our day-to-day life, there are many things, even few of our rituals, which we just keep following and obeying because our ancestors told us. But there are areas of ignorance which needs to be pushed back. We can come up with new insight why exactly we are doing it and why it is to be done so. So if we keep on working on that, then we can say that we are developing culturally also, and that can happen because of the research only. Let me tell you, a human being is coming to the grip of nature, is understanding the nature, and there are two ways how human being can understand nature. Is first is your experience, and second one is reasoning. Now, experience need not be always personal. You can understand the nature, or you can understand different phenomenon or processes that happens in nature either with your personal experience. Sometimes it is being said that if you sit with the elders and listen to them carefully, you can understand so many things. So the others' experience can also help us in understanding various processes and phenomena in the field and in the nature as well. And even you can listen to experts or authorities in that field of research, or in the field of any type of research. There you can understand the process and phenomenon of the particular field in detail from authorities. There is another way of understanding the field of study, and in that there are three ways which comes under reasoning. There is first method which came into picture from Greek and Aristotle. That method is known as deductive method. Deductive method is also known as era of logic, where he means Greeks and Aristotle, they explain that if you want to come up with new insight into the unknown facts, at that time what you can do is you can take help of syllogism. So that method where logic is being used, say for example, you cannot say king is immortal. He is immortal, but you cannot say directly onto his face. So at that time what they did, they explained it in a method which is known as method of logic or syllogism, where they took help of two sentences to prove the third one. Say for example, king is a human being and human being is a mortal. So ultimately it indicates that king is also mortal. He is going to die one fine day. So that method is known as deductive method. But the drawback with deductive method was that you cannot come up with new ideas or new insights unless and until you have some proven facts available. So that method was being discarded by Francis Bacon. Over a period of time, he came up with the idea that why don't we observe the phenomenon, and observation will give you new insight into that particular process or phenomenon. And he came up with a method which is known as inductive method, or it is also known as era of evidences. So what Francis Bacon recommended, he recommended to all that you keep observing the things, and you will find that there are a lot of evidences you can gather to understand why that particular process or phenomenon is happening and why it is happening in that way only. Over a period of time, Charles Darwin, who is also known as father of evolution, he came up with a concept that sometimes you have to find answer with logical thinking, and sometimes you have to go for searching the evidences. So why don't we integrate the deductive method and inductive method to come up with a answer to a pressing question? And after integration of deductive and inductive method, he named it as a scientific approach, which we follow in field of science. Whatever research we carry out, it needs to be reproducible, it needs to be replicable, it needs to be verifiable, and unless and until it is so, it won't be called as a scientific approach. So this scientific approach which we use into research, it is given to us by Charles Darwin. And it is being said that all progress is born of inquiry. So one need to be inquisitive enough, curious enough to understand and to follow certain processes or phenomenon to get newer insight or deeper insight into that. So what research is? Research is made up of two syllables. One is re and another one is search. Re is a prefix. It means again, anew or over again. Whereas search is a verb meaning to examine closely and carefully, to test and try or to probe. And when these two, re and search, are combined, it becomes a noun. So together they form a noun describing the careful, systematic, patient study and investigation in some field of knowledge, the field of knowledge. So when we go for a research, there are a number of questions which are there in front of the scientist, like what must be the reason, or what could be the reason behind that particular thing which is happening, when it is happening, when we are finding that whenever we are into that circumstances, that thing is being observed. Then we have a question why it must be happening, how it must be happening, under what condition we are observing it, and is there any restriction, under which circumstances or under which restriction it is being observed to be followed. So when we try to address all these questions, these are all questions which cannot be answered in a simple sentence with yes or no. So whenever scientist is facing this kind of question, scientist must be curious enough or inquisitive enough. He must exhibit some curiosity to answer these questions. It is being said that if question ceases, so does the scientific process then. So an inquisitive mind should always be troubled by this kind of question, like what, when, why, how, under what condition, and with what restriction. And if inquisitive mind keeps asking this kind of question to himself, at that time he will be trying to discover some new facts, new things into the field of knowledge. So if this kind of question ceases, let me tell you, so does the scientific process then. No progress can be made without inquisitiveness. So what exactly research is? Research is nothing but it is the search for knowledge or a discovery of a hidden truth. You can say that it is an art of scientific investigation. You must be curious enough, you must be scrupulous enough to understand what must be the reason behind whatever is happening around. And that's why it is said that it is an art of scientific investigation. When we carry out some kind of research work, whenever we try to understand and come up with new facts or new insight into any unknown thing, at that time it is being said that you are putting some new contribution to the existing stock of knowledge in that field. So in short, we can say that research is ubiquitous, it is present everywhere, it is omnipresent, it is omnipotent, and it can happen in any field. May it be field of medicine, may it be field of sociology, may it be field of psychology, even historical research also take place. Now, when we are trying to get an answer to our pressing question, whichever process we follow or whichever way we try to follow to get the answer to our question will not qualify as a research unless and until it implies or it falls or it obeys some criteria. There are three important criteria to which needs to be obeyed or qualified by any process to be called as a research process. The first important criteria is that the process which is being undertaken should be undertaken within a framework of a set philosophies or approaches. So haphazard approaches cannot be used. You should have a set framework of undertaking the process. So approaches needs to be properly followed. Then you must use the procedures, methods and techniques that have been tested for their validity and reliability. So methods which we are using must be valid enough and must be reliable, so that if any successor needs to replicate your results, he should be in the process to reproduce the results using the method which you have used or procedure which you have followed. And third and most important thing into the research or the process which you are going to use to call it as a research process, the process must be designed to be unbiased and objective. So biased nature, if you are following into the process, then it will not be called as a research process. So adherence to these three important criteria mentioned above, it enables the process which you are using to find out the answer to a pressing question will be called as a research one. What are the different methods of acquiring knowledge? You can acquire knowledge sometimes at the back of your mind you have a sixth sense which is saying that this thing is going to happen, and at that time you cannot explain it to anyone else how you are feeling that this is going to happen. So that is something which is known as intuition. So you can understand or you can come up with something new based on your intuition, that is known as sixth sense. Sometimes you can gain the knowledge from authority. So the person who is expert in that field can give you information or can pass on the knowledge onto you. There is another way of getting knowledge into any field, that is known as rationalism. You keep reading the details about that field and you try to get the logical answers to the question. So that is the way of acquiring knowledge, that is known as rationalism. Another important way of getting knowledge into any field is going for some kind of experiments into it, that is known as empiricism. So you are purposefully manipulating some variables, and based on the purposeful manipulation of your variables, you are understanding the cause and effect relationship into that, and that is known as empiricism. This is how you can gain the knowledge in that field. And another one is science. If the facts have been already proven, it has been documented into a scientific field, at that time you can just go through that scientific documents and you can gain the knowledge about that field. Now, what are the different characteristics of a scientific research? When you say that I am following or I am doing scientific research, it has to have some characteristics. There are 5 different characteristics your scientific research should have. First one is that it should be controlled. So whatever work you are carrying out, you should set up your study in such a way that minimizes the effect of other factors affecting the relationship between cause and effect. It may happen that at a time there are different factors or variables which have a direct impact or influence onto the outcome of your work. So at that time you must know that you can study one effect of one factor onto the outcome at a time. So other factors needs to be controlled at that point of time, and then only you can understand cause and effect relationship. So you best and most important characteristic of scientific research is that it has to be controlled. Second important characteristics is that it should be rigorous. So the researcher who is undertaking that research, he must be scrupulous enough in ensuring that the procedure which he is using or the technique which he is following to find answer to the pressing question is relevant, is appropriate and justified. So there has to have some logical thinking going behind using particular procedure or technique to get the answer to your question, and the method and technique which you are using must be relevant, must be appropriate and must be justified. Third important characteristic which a scientific research must follow and have is it has to be systematic. The procedure which are adopted must be followed in certain logical sequence. There should not be any haphazardness when you are following any research process or procedure. So you should be systematic enough while following particular procedure or particular technique. Another important characteristic of a scientific research is that it must be valid and verifiable. So whatever outcome is there of your research, the successor or the other people into the field, if they are willing to testify whether your research is correct or not, at that time they should be able to reproduce whatever outcome on whatever conclusion you have drawn out of your research work. So whatever you conclude on the basis of your finding must be correct and can be verified by you and other wherever they are on the planet Earth. So whatever research findings are there, they must be verifiable. And last and important characteristic of a scientific research is that it has to be empirical and critical. So it should not be boasting kind of thing that you are saying and other should accept it. Nobody will accept or research fraternity will not accept your conclusion unless and until your conclusions are drawn based upon hard evidences which you have gathered from real life experience or your hard working into the lab where you have done a lot of observation, and based on the observation you have come up to the conclusion. And the process of investigation which you have used needs to be foolproof and it must be free from the drawbacks. So these are the 5 important characteristics. If your process is following those characteristics or having those characteristics, then it will be called or qualify as a scientific research. Now, let us talk something about types of research. There are different ways of classifying research. The 3 broad ways of classifying research is that you can classify research or give types of research based on the application of findings. There is another way, objective of the study. On the basis of objective of study, research can be classified, and based on mode of inquiry, it can be classified under 2 classes. So based on application of finding, research is classified as pure research and applied research. Pure research is something which is known as fundamental research or basic research. Though it doesn't have immediate application, it forms a foundation or basic for applied research. So no doubt, pure research is the most important research which is carried out in any field of study, but it doesn't have immediate application. And applied research is something which is always carried out on the basis of your foundation or fundamental research. Applied research has immediate application. So pressing question is there. At that time, fundamental research is not undertaken. The research which is undertaken to come up with a solution to the pressing problem or the problem which you are facing right now, at that time, applied research, or it is also known as action research, is being carried out. Based on objective of study, there are 4 different types of research. One is known as descriptive study, or it is also known as survey type of research. Second type of research in objective of study is correlational, or it is also known as analytical research. Third type of research which is being given under objective of studies is explanatory research. Explanatory research, it is also known as empirical research or experimental research. And exploratory research, it is also known as conceptual research. So in survey type of research, you undertake the surveys to come up with a conclusion that, say for example, gulab jamun is a delicious delicacy which we have into Indian culture. But to prove this fact, I will have to undertake some survey kind of study, and based on the conclusion, based on the outcome of the survey, I can conclude whether it is so or whether it is not. In correlational study, we try to understand the cause and effect relationship, or we try to understand the relationship between different variables, and that's why it is also known as analytical research. In explanatory research, we try to manipulate certain variables to understand what could be the relationship between different variables, and that's why it is also known as experimental research. In exploratory research, I have some ideas at the back of my mind and I want to understand whether it happens so or not, and that's why I want to explore that particular concept. That is known as conceptual research or exploratory research. Based on the mode of inquiry, research is being classified under 2 classes, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is something which, to be very honest, should not be qualified as a research process, because in criteria to qualify as a research, we have seen that it needs to be unbiased and it needs to be objective. But qualitative research is said to be very subjective and can be biased. Something which I may like today may not like tomorrow. So my opinion regarding that particular thing may change over a period of time. So qualitative research is a person based or it is opinion based, and that's why to be clear, qualitative research cannot be called as a type of research. And another one is based on mode of inquiry. If you are trying to collect a lot of data, analyze it statistically and come up with a conclusion, then that type of research is known as quantitative research. Now let us see what could be the objectives of the research. Whenever any researchers start working onto any particular project, he has some objectives in front of him, and these objectives could be, this could be one of these. First, he may be interested in gaining a familiarity. He or she may be interested in gaining a familiarity with the phenomenon or to achieve new insights into any particular process or any particular program. Another objective which could be there is to portray accurately the characteristic of a particular individual, situation, or a group. Or he or she as a researcher may be interested in determining the frequency with which something occurs or with which it may be associated. And another objective of any research could be to test a hypothesis of a causal relationship between variables, because when we start with any particular research process, we have some hypothesis uh, being put up in front of us, where we are interested in finding some relationship between different variables. So that could be one of the objectives, that we are interested in testing a hypothesis of a causal relationship. Now, what are the different motivations in research? The first and most of the time, the motivation which may be there into the research is gaining the degree, research degree. Say, for example, in most of the universities, postgraduate is being awarded partly by paper and partly by research. So, to qualify for postgraduate certification, one has to undertake research as a part of his curriculum. So another thing is that when you are interested in getting a doctoral degree, so PhD cannot be awarded unless and until you are completing any research project and submitting it successfully to the university. So degree could be the one of the motivations in going and getting into the research work. Another motivation which could be there into the for getting into the research could be challenges. Someone loves challenges, accepting challenges, enjoys in the challenges, and enjoying our own potential. Can we achieve this or not? So that could be the motivation for undertaking research. Another motivation which could be there is you get an intellectual joy when you are doing something on your own without anybody's support, or using your own gray matter. At that time, you have a different feeling, because this is my achievement, this I have achieved, or this I have done on my own. So that is another joy, and that is known as intellectual joy. One may be interested in getting that, so he or she is going for research. Another motivation which could be there in front of a researcher is to service to the society. Someone is interested in doing social work, and for doing social work, every time it is not required that you should be there onto the field and working with the people. Sometimes you can work for the people, doing a lot of work into the laboratories for the service of the society or to service of the mankind. And the last motivation which could be there, obviously, to get a respect. The person who is having research degree, say for example, someone is there with a doctoral research work, has done doctoral research work, has got PhD degree, or someone has received postdoctoral degree. So that fellow, that person will have a different respect into the society. So someone may be interested in getting that respect and going into the research studies or getting involved into the research work. Now, what is the definition of a good research? There are different things which must be there into your research study, and then only whatever research outcome you are coming up with, we can say that you have done a good research work. So for getting that acknowledgement that your research work is actually a good one, for that, first thing is that it must have a clear objective or clear purpose. The researcher who has started with that or initiated that research work must have a clear cut idea and should have a clear vision that what exactly he is in achieving. So he should have clear objective or purpose of carrying out that research. Whatever methods or techniques or procedures which we are using into carrying out the research must be described in detail. So ambiguity should not be there. How we have done it, nobody is able to understand it. So that kind of research will not be considered as a good research work. And another important thing is that whatever design you have done for research work, that is known as research design or plan of work, that should be planned properly. It should not be haphazard way of working into the research. Then whatever data which will be generated after carrying out your research work, it needs to be analyzed properly. So adequate analysis of data needs to be carried out, need to be done. And whatever data has been generated, that needs to be valid as well. Valid and verifiable, it is the most important characteristic of a research work. So whatever data we have generated by carrying out research work, it needs to be valid. And whatever conclusion you are drawing, it has to be evidence based. Sometimes this happens that being a researcher, we may procrastinate, and actually procrastination is the human tendency. So my advice to all researchers will be that make sure that you are concluding based on the evidence which you have gathered by your hard work into the laboratory. Never ever procrastinate, never ever boast that I have done this, I have done that, for which if you do not have any support or evidence or the data which is supporting your claim at the time, your research work or your whole efforts which you have put in behind that particular project could go in vain, because you are claiming something for which you don't have evidences or for which you don't have supporting data. So to qualify it as a good research, the conclusion which is being made by a researcher has to be evidence based. So it may happen that if you are procrastinating at the end point of your research work, still whatever efforts and whatever time and energy you have invested in conducting that or completing that research work may go in vain, may become useless, because the conclusion you are not able to draw on the basis of the evidences which you have gathered. So again, I would suggest that never ever boast. Whatever you have got may it be positive result. Even you should be courageous enough to report your negative results, because by reporting negative results, you give a clear-cut idea to the fellow researchers that this is the way. If you are following, you may not get the results or you may face the failure. So even publishing the negative result can be a good can be acceptable or can be recommended, because that gives idea to the fellow researcher not to go with the way previous researcher have done. So these are the way these are the criteria, or these are the qualifications which your research, if it is fulfilling, then we can say that researcher has carried out a good research work. The last important thing into this particular presentation, where I would like to take your attention to, is there are two terminologies which are involved. One is known as research methods, and another one is known as research methodology. Research methodology is a broad term which involve different techniques, methods, and other ways of knowing how to carry out the research work. So research method is one of the aspects of the research methodology. Research method simply talks about all those methods and techniques that are being used for conduction of a research work by a researcher, whereas research methodology, it is a science of knowing how to carry out a research work. So different techniques, along with different techniques, what are the data analysis methods, how to plan the research design, how to execute your research project, all those things are culminated into one definition, or which is being part of one particular broad term, and that is known as research methodology. So when we study research methodology at postgraduate or doctoral research studies, one must understand that research methodology is a broad term which include all the ways by which research work is to be carried out and how you can complete your research work successfully. So research methodology, it is a science of knowing how to research work is to be carried out. I hope the things are very much clear, and you must have got a clear picture about research methodology and scientific research. Thank you. Thanks a lot.